Welcome to the Goodman School of Business State of the School. My name is Kaisa Sirocco, and I work in alumni relations for the Goodman School of Business. I would like to begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which Brock University was built is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Thank you for joining us for the first of what we hope to be an annual event, the Goodman School of Business State of the School. I would like to give a warm welcome to everyone from the Goodman School of Business and Brock University communities, especially our alumni joining from around the world, our students, staff, and faculty, and our community members. This event is meant to engage and inform you and allow us the opportunity to reflect on the most extraordinary year in a generation, how the business school responded, and how Goodman is positioning itself for future. We had a number of questions come through registration, so thank you for sending those in. We will address as many as possible in the question and answer period. If you have additional questions throughout the event, please just utilize the chat function on the right-hand side. At this point, I would like to introduce the Dean of the Goodman School of Business, Dr. Andrew Godis. Andrew is entering his 10th year as a business dean and has served as the Dean of the Goodman School of Business since 2017. He has led in developing programs and partnerships for undergraduate and graduate students with world-leading business schools. He also led in forming the only Canadian business school partnership with the United Nations for a paid co-op placement of Goodman students at UN agencies worldwide. He serves on the board of directors for the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, as the Ontario Representative Dean for the Business Schools Association of Canada, member of the Americas Advisory Board and the Steering Committee for the European Foundation for Management Development, the International Advisory Board for the Burgundy School of Business in Dijon, France, and is currently the president of the International Partnership of Business Schools, a consortium of 13 world-class business schools located on 3 continents. I would also like to introduce Mishka Balsam, the CEO of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. Mishka is responsible for developing and implementing initiatives that are designed to strengthen the business climate in Niagara and support the economic prosperity of the region. Under her leadership, the GNCC launched a number of new programs and collaborative partnerships, not only within the region, but throughout Ontario and New York State. Mishka has positioned the GNCC as one of the region's most credible and visible voices of business. Determined and passionate, she is positively advancing change through collaboration, adaptability, and sound decision-making. In an effort to support the growth of Niagara's economy, Mishka is actively involved with a high number of community organizations within Niagara, other municipalities across Ontario, and internationally with organizations such as the Buffalo Niagara Partnership. She currently sits on the Goodman School of Business Dean's Advisory Council, the Niagara College Board of Governors, and is Vice Chair to the Chamber Executives of Ontario. Without further ado, let us give a warm welcome to both Andrew and Mishka. I'll now turn it over to Mishka.
Thank you so very much, and thank you to your team, to your colleagues at the Goodman School for organizing the inaugural State of the School event. We have come together to discuss how the Goodman School of Business has responded to this most extraordinary year, and especially when looking at it not only from a local, but rather from a global perspective. There are over 1 million students enrolled in universities in Canada. Post-secondary education makes up 2.4% of the country's GDP, and in some communities, Niagara being one of them, universities fuel the local economy. The Goodman School alone contributes annually over $380 million to Niagara's economy. And in addition, the students of today are our future workforce, which effectively makes Goodman Business School an integral community partner in regional economic prosperity. So today's dialogue is critical during the best of times, and likely even more during this pandemic, which has dramatically challenged post-secondary institutions and related economies, but it has also provided a unique opportunity at the same time. For today's discussion, we have thought that it's invaluable to look back on what the past 60 months have meant to the school, students, staff, and alumni, and then to look forward to talk about what Goodman's future holds. And on that note, let's just get started. Andrew, One of the most important aspects that we have realized in this past year is that we are more interdependent as a society, as an economy, and as a community. To some examples, we're looking at the connections between the private and public sectors. Business currently depend on the rapid decision-making of our elected officials when it comes to accessing subsidies, grants, and the fastest decision-making that we have seen in history. When I look at sectors such as health and economy, we clearly see that the speed of the vaccination rollout and the way we are supporting the direction of public health officials determines the speed of the economic recovery. Again, we see a correlation between those two areas. And as a post-secondary business school, your connection locally has a direct and indirect impact on our region. As a local economic driver, can you speak to Goodman's role in the community during this crisis? What has transpired? What changed over the past year, and especially when looking at community connections, and not maybe only in Niagara, but also the Golden Horseshoe of Ontario and the rest of Ontario and Canada that you serve? Over to you.
Hi, Mishka. Well, thank you very much, Mishka, and thanks for hosting this today. Good day, everyone. Good evening in our region, and good day around the world for all the people who are watching beyond our own time zone. It's a pleasure to be able to speak to you today and to share with you what we've done over this past, as you mentioned, 16 months and what we see going forward. No doubt this has been an experience that the whole world can share as a disruption, and we'll have for our stories going forward in our future years, speaking to other generations, how we responded and how we reacted. Not unlike any other academic institution, we had to pull back and become remote and online delivery of education, as well as remote work. Thankfully, most educational institutions have been able to do that quite successfully for the students and for our communities that we support. Brock University is no different. We responded, we reacted to the pandemic with a model that allowed us to deliver our programming off-site for our students, and also provide work that was supported remotely by our employees, our faculty and staff. One of the things that we did do was ensure that we remain connected to our community. We found that during this period of disruption, we spent a lot of time being away from each other and really working so hard to try to make things function as far as delivering education, working on our individual tasks, that we may have forgotten about the people we work with, the people we are working for, as well as what the fact that this is temporary and that we are going to get through it. And what we found was part of the need was to engage with the community regularly. And we did a number of different things. And I think one of the areas that really came to shine was our Goodman group of services, and in particular our business breathers that we started delivering in and around April, May last year, that allowed for a weekly break from what we were struggling through, with a 45-minute session with members of our community, both within our university and further afield, to just have a conversation as to, within a particular domain of the expertise of the individual, how things are working for them, what are they doing, how are they working through, and advice and suggestions and relevant topics in this disruption. This really started to pick up with interest, and we've seen registrants grow to multiple countries. Somewhere towards 24 countries have dropped into these business breathers, more than 3,000 registrants. And I believe we're probably at about 30 broadcasting 30 webinars in this period of time. We slowed it down to one every 2 weeks in the fall, and we've carried on with that. But that's just one example where Business Breathers has reached out to our community. Goodman Group also developed some programming that allowed for people to take online, that could be to advance better knowledge with respect to emotional intelligence. Cybersecurity is another one that we developed. And the list goes on with the types of programs that we started to offer that allow people to study and to take some retooling and upskilling while they were at home. And so while we all moved into an online and a virtual environment, Goodman Group also did the same thing and never delivered anything online before. So this was a whole new entry for the Goodman Group, and it allowed us not only to respond to our community, but we started to see registrants that were coming in from beyond our province in other parts of Canada, as well as into the United States. So those are just some of the examples that we saw adjustments specific to the business school during this period of disruption.
Thank you so very much, actually. And I think it was really welcome to see from all students, actually, how quickly actually post-secondary actually adjusted to it to meet the demands and to make sure that students actually could stay the course. The school's mission is to be a globally oriented and community-dedicated business school that engages and challenges through scholarly initiatives, education, and practice with a diverse and inclusive community. And I want to specifically touch base on your outreach and the global community that Goodman is actually connected with. Future career ambitions of many students go far beyond Niagara, Ontario, or even Canada. Trade, innovation, sector-specific skills and expertise are being shared internationally. You've been the Dean of Goodman for a little bit more than 5 years, I believe. And what changes have you seen? What changes have you seen during this time, and what international connections have grown, especially during this past year, to support the mission of this school?
Yeah, you know, I think one of the things that we're quite proud of is the engagement that we have with an international community for our students. We've got towards 80%, 85% of our graduate students are abroad, working and studying or coming from countries beyond Canada. Certainly in this year, they're studying in countries other than Canada in most instances. And about 1/4 to 30% of our undergraduate students are also international. So when this disruption took place, we had students or applicants that were looking towards coming to the Goodman School of Business for fall 2020 with the idea they were going to be there physically. And of course, mid-March, everything started to change. And unfortunately, the students or the applicants that were beyond Canada were really starting to wonder, what does it look like for them in September? It was imperative for us to start messaging our applicants that we are moving online, that we are delivering program, and that in essence, this is a period of time that is a bridge towards eventually coming to the other side and seeing individuals participate in study and on our campus in its traditional form. So we got the message out as quick as we could. And by about mid-April, we certainly had advised our graduate applicants that we would be online and that we would be able to deliver content for them remotely. And this was with the support of our faculty who were prepared to be online in the fall. And this was a model that we started to create in response to this pandemic. We really didn't know, as anyone did, how long it was going to last. We didn't know if we were going to be able to come back in January this year in 2021, or if it was going to extend further. But we certainly knew that we had applicants that were interested in participating in our programs, and we wanted to make sure that that still existed. So that was one important part. The other element was ensuring that we actually had an opportunity for students who were studying abroad to come to Canada, and then to see things like the visa come into play for support for them to come to Canada, as well as their studies while they are overseas and studying online, that gets counted towards their postgraduate work permit, which is so very important to students who are looking towards Canada, who are further afield outside of Canada and wanting to come to Canada to study, the idea of working in Canada after they graduate. Thankfully, the federal government also were following and ensuring that visas were being supported. And of course, we wished things were happening much more quickly, but also just the difficulty of getting to offices in countries around the world to get those visa requirements satisfied. But then also the postgraduate work permit with the federal government allowing for students who are basically studying entirely online outside of Canada to have that count towards the postgraduate work permit. So we stayed in contact with our students. We ended up with a student body that came from 60 plus countries, studying in our programs from all over the world, and that just speaks to the commitment of the students who wanted a Goodman education, as well as the commitment of our faculty and staff to support that intent of our students.
It was good. It was actually good to see. And I think one of the things that we were really pleased to see was also the assistance from the federal government actually on many of those issues in ensuring that some of those were overcome. So it was good to see. And let me shift slightly, and I want to move a little bit away from the health and economic issues that have really been prevalent over the last 16 months. But this past year, also significant events in our country, as they were announced last week, and in our neighboring one, have highlighted issues around inequity and exclusion. In addition to these events, the pandemic has also disproportionately impacted some people, among them women, single mothers, people with disabilities, and minorities. So the language of equity, diversity, and inclusion has certainly entered into everyday conversation. An outcome, although rooted in long-term painful experiences, is a welcome change. What does EDI mean to Goodman schools? In the time of crisis, how can we foster a greater sense of belonging?
Mm-hmm. And I'd say a few things that have come out of this pandemic that are silver linings, if we can use that language, is that we've discovered that we can work remotely. And by the way, my area of research is on telework and virtual methods of collaboration since around 1998, 1999. So this year was just a petri dish of being able to see how that works en masse, and I'm so pleased that we were able to see ourselves deliver remotely. And the important part about that part of the silver linings in this disruption is it allowed for people to be able to work where they ultimately may end up wanting to work, and that's from home. Tremendous challenges, though, with respect to not necessarily an equitable set of circumstances where people work from, and the opportunity to work from home, and being able to also for students to study from home. There's great challenges as far as the geography where people are located, the work requirements, and the financial viability of people having to work and also be at home in that distributed model. So that was one of the areas. But the other part that overlaps with this, I believe that in this past year, we have a higher level of compassion that's been generated within the community and in the workplace, and the people we interact with a higher regard for, you know, when you say today, when you say, how are you? There's such a high level of genuine tone to that, where it used to be something you would say just out of tradition. How are you doing? You'd say, I'm fine. Today it's, how are you? I mean, how are you? And that goes to your physical health, your mental health, your circumstances, your family, your work circumstances. And we really want to know and understand and work towards addressing as best as possible. So I think that was another element that came out of this. Notwithstanding all of that, we, as a business school, as a university, have long been working towards creating a more equitable, a diverse, and an inclusive environment. And I believe that Brock University and Goodman School of Business has been strong in that area, but that's not to say we can't do more. And I believe anyone within our institution would say the same. There's more for us to do. But I will say that within my time at the Goodman School of Business, we've certainly had conversations about including representation across groups within the student leadership. My dean's advisory is represented with diversity. We've had our student body is diverse, and we've have a high level of regard to ensure that everyone has a voice as best as possible. And that's, again, not to say that we're finished. I think there's more work for us to do. I do believe that diversity is the first part to get to inclusiveness. You can't have inclusion without having diversity. And so we've been working very hard. And as you know, we've been ranked first in Canada as a business school for faculty and classroom diversity. So that's one thing that we're quite proud of. That's not something that happens overnight. That takes years of recruiting a faculty, years of building a sense of safety and security and confidence that studying at the Goodman School of Business in our Niagara region is a place for students to come from around the world. And we've been able to succeed in that space. And I think everyone at our school can be quite proud of that. But also it means that with that diversity, we have to work harder to make sure that that diversity is also having a voice that is offered by each and every one. And that's an area for us to work. I would say the other part that we have to work on is ensuring that a child that's in grade 4, who is an equity from a part of an equity seeking group who sees a business school, can see her or himself in that school as a student, can see her or himself in that school as an educator, as an administrator, but also someone who could see recognized as a distinguished leader, as we do annually. We recognize alumni, members of our community, as well as for our Beta Gamma Sigma, we recognize an honoree, and we do this every year. And we have to make sure that the people that we elevate and praise and recognize for their leadership skills are as diverse as the student body. Our students have to see themselves in the people who are developing and creating curriculum, as well as guiding our trajectory of our student body. And to that end, some of the areas that we do reach in that space, when I think about, again, bringing in the Goodman Group, we have the Kickstart Entrepreneurship that goes into the school system and allows for students to see themselves as innovators and entrepreneurs. We also have our Goodman Lemonade, which allows for some financial literacy for kids that actually create a lemonade stand and market it, and they have to set up their own plan. But bringing that into the school system and ensuring that we go to the schools where we see diversity into the area of business in a way that allows them to feel comfortable in that space, I think is critical to ensure that in time we're going to see our schools a demographic representation of our most diverse regions in our community. And I'll also mention that the Goodman Lemonade, this week actually we were able to share the message that First Ontario sees this as an initiative that we've been doing annually, as one for them to invest in and support because of the strength of that program and introducing financial literacy. So when it comes to diversity, I think we've been building in that space. Inclusiveness, I think there's a lot of work we need to do to ensure that people have a voice. But I also truly believe that we have to go into the younger years to make sure that they feel comfortable with the idea that they could have a university education at a business school and potentially be recognized as a leader when they graduate and they're engaging in their career.
You know, Andrew, I really do appreciate you mentioning, and especially the specific examples that you've given too, because I think it's the leadership from your school and Brock University that really does make a difference, and it resonates with businesses and the community as a whole. I think that's where I think post-secondary institutions shine, is when they take a lead on especially such critical issues that are shaping our society and our future. And you were right in saying that this is not an overnight fix. This is a long-term commitment, and although we are impatient about it, it sometimes is that we also have to be patient with ourselves as we're changing our boardrooms, our councils, the makeup of our staff and colleagues, and the overall body that we interact with. So it's really good to see. But I also wanted to ask you, or not ask you, just comment that I think it was really good when you mentioned actually the mental health, and when you talked about how we respond to when someone says, "And how are you?" And I wanted to give you an example. I had recently on one of our webinars that we had through our chamber, we had the president of BDC on it. So economists were hard, and we expected and anticipated a conversation fully focused on numbers and other things. And within his first minute of opening remarks, he actually talked about mental health and the impact on it, how little we know, how this time actually is shaping us, and what it means for the future. So to hear this from all sectors, that you speak to it, that BDC, financial institutes, economists and others are mentioning that aspect too, I think is really, really critical, because it makes us aware and most definitely more sensitive to it when we look at how we're building teams, how we're supporting our teams, our customers, our structures that we're building. So it was good to see here. But I want to go slightly, it touches on the conversation we've just been having over the last couple of minutes, but I wanted to also say that we often hear parallels between the COVID-19 crisis that we're in right now and when it comes to sustainability, specifically when we talk about climate change. And Mark Carney, Canadian economist who served as the governor of the Bank of Canada and the government of the Bank of England, has dedicated most of his latest book called Values to this topic. And he speaks to the growing inequality in income and opportunity, systemic racism, health and economic crises from the global pandemic, mistrust that we might have in experts, and the existential threat of climate change, arguing that these fundamental problems stem from a common crisis in values. As a business school, does this change, does this time, when you look at this, change your teaching at Goodman? Is the integration of sustainability in a higher education critical? What role does it play?
I would first say that I believe sustainability, that conversation's been around in schools for a very long time. Certainly as long as I've been engaged in business education, it's been something that we talk about. Now, I would also, to your point, I think in this past year, we've seen a crescendo of gravity around the discussion on sustainability. It's not just about, you know, if you can do this, that's great. If you can do this with some sustainability intentions, that's better. I do believe now it's becomes part of the bottom line, which is where it should be sitting with every organization. I also think, if I can share this perspective, is that we're in an interesting spot because of a few things coming together. One of them, this pandemic has allowed us to all stop, forced us to stop, and to think globally, around the world, all at the same time about this disruption. This isn't a world war. It's nothing like that, but it is a global disruption that has massive implications as to how we see ourselves and how others see this period going forward. I really believe that how we respond to this period of disruption is going to shape who we are and the stories we share with generations going forward. And those generations are going to be asking us, what did we do? How did we respond? And how they see us is going to be based upon how we responded during this period of disruption. I really believe that. But this other interesting thing that happens at the same time is we have, I'm going to get into what would you call it? I can't think of the word right now, unfortunately, but basically generational cohorts. And we look at the baby boomers, which has started to be less of the conversation compared to the millennials, but certainly it was a topic of conversation for quite some time. But the baby boomers are really getting into those years of retirement and looking towards what can we do to leave a better world. And that's not unusual when you get into years that are north of 50, north of 60. You start thinking about legacy and thinking about the world you leave. And so it's a healthy consideration, but we have a very, very large population still in comparison to past generations thinking that way. And I think that's a good thing. We also have a generation of millennials who are coming in who are seeking purpose in their lives that wasn't necessarily there 20, 30 years ago in the same way, maybe not even 10 years ago. And I think that that's also healthy because millennials are challenging organizations to say, okay, well, that's good what you're doing, but show me where the purpose is behind this. And with the millennials thinking that way and with the baby boomers wanting to leave a better legacy, I really think we have very nice bookends to a period of time that allows us to have good conversations across the generations on what are we going to do to yet have better stewardship of our planet, better stewardship of through organizations, conscious of the fact that if you don't leave it the way you found it, you won't be able to sustain what you're doing in the first place. And I think that that's becoming more and more of a conversation. It's becoming louder and louder across our programming, to the extent we had a symposium just a few weeks ago hosted by our CPA Center, where more than 30,000 people registered for this on sustainability and accounting and practices. That just speaks to the importance of this particular topic. And we're certainly listening to that. In this year, we've launched in this past 2 weeks a call for a research scholar within our faculty that receives funds in support of research activity around sustainability. We've also social innovation. And we also created a stimulus spending opportunity, stimulus opportunity in research support for faculty in this year to provide proposals that have research in the area of sustainability as well. So we are seeing growth in this space. And for me, in our school, I would say that this is an area that we have to watch closely and see it develop and flourish in the coming years.
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate your perspective on it as well. And especially a reference to it saying that this next generation is also seeking purpose in all that they're doing and maybe asking different questions than other generations have done previously. I want to shift now and really take a look at the future of Goodman. And I am going to use this heavily overused, and people cringe when they hear this word pivoting. So I'm going to use it.
How did I know that was the word?
I know, but it's how did Goodman make a shift? Can you pivot in this time and during this time? And when you look at it and saying, this is what next year looks like, this is what likely the next 3 years for us look like. And if we can touch on maybe graduate work, cooperative learning, and other areas of it where you're saying these are going to be key aspects for Goodman to make a shift and to pivot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say responding to environmental factors is what we're talking about. We've had that language for a very long time. This year we've called it pivot because the response had to be so quick. Clearly one of the most significant shifts for a university anywhere to have done is to move everything online 100%. This is a dialogue that can happen for a long time about, do we go online, do we not go online? Well, we didn't have that luxury of time to discuss. We had an imperative, a commitment, an obligation to ensure that we delivered programming. We either closed our doors or we continued in an online environment. And we did the responsible thing, like almost every single post-secondary institution did around the world. We moved online and we continued. Now, we're still working on an emergency element. We're really online because we have to be. And when we start to see the pandemic loosen up and we start to see restrictions and guidelines towards safe and health practices also relax, and we come back to campus, it's a matter of how much stays online and how much goes back into the classrooms. And that's just, to your question, that's just one facet of how we move forward in this and adjust to the environment. The language uses pivot, or we all use is pivot. One of the things that I think about, and I've expressed this to my faculty as well, online is not necessarily a convenience factor for students, and it's a challenge for many people to come to a campus, even if they live not too far from the campus, for various reasons, as I expressed earlier. It could be because of geography, it could be because of work hours, it could be because of family commitments, and almost all of those things that I've identified and more speak to the people who are typically in equity-seeking groups. And if we want to really make ourselves accessible to the broad spectrum of the people that aspire to have an education in business, we have to make ourselves accessible in ways that we haven't before. It really is an imperative, and it's a responsibility. If we're talking about diversity and inclusiveness and access, we have to talk about online as part of that equation. Not entirely online, as we are today, but we have to think about how do we provide access to this programming without having to be in the classroom in the conventional way. And I think we're going to be able to address that. Our research areas have become much more broad, and I think it's fantastic. The questions that our faculty that are coming in and our senior faculty are shifting into really great questions to be worked on and to find answers and to have a better understanding of what our workplace looks like. Our workplace has changed tremendously, and I think that that's also a good thing. Where the conversation within our own university is about who's online, who's remote working, who's in office. Flex work is a question. Work-life balance is an ongoing and increasing dialogue. So I really think the practice of work has had a fundamental shove off of the rails that we've been on for quite some time. And no one likes to be pushed into cold water, but eventually you start finding that cold water is not necessarily too uncomfortable, and you learn how to swim, and you might actually find yourselves enjoying that. We've been pushed into cold water, and we're working through it. And I think in some ways we're going to find that we're able to swim in it and find some existence that includes being in the water as well as being on the shore.
Yeah, I think it's a good analogy of it. And I think it also what is happening within Goodman and within the universities around the world is also something that's happening within the workforce. I'm looking at how many employers are currently looking at downsizing their offices and redesigning it. and looking at the future of what work looks like differently too. So I think it's probably good to have it mirrored in our post-secondary institutions at the same time. And I think it will be, the future of it will be a much more hybrid model than what we have seen in the past. And something that none of us businesses have never anticipated in beforehand either. So it is new to all of us, but I think at the same time we're learning significantly during this process. Goodman faculty members contribute more than 8,500 service hours to the community each year through pro bono consulting and serving on boards and committees. You personally deeply value engagement in the community. How do you foster such a culture, and what are the benefits to your schools and to students?
I think it's driven by the faculty, honestly. Our faculty have passions that are in the classroom, in their research, and in contributing to their community. And the community could be, it could be the local tennis club, it could be the local mosque, it could be the local market as far as fruits and vegetables, and they see an important part of being able to contribute and to be part of those communities. And I just shared a very brief example of a few. And because of that, I think that universities are a great opportunity for people to be able to offer that kind of support beyond their office hours, if I can use that kind of language. And then we recognize it. And I think that's one of the great parts about a university environment, that we talk about teaching and research, but we also talk about service. And service is not only internal, it's external. What are you doing for the school and the university, but what are you also doing for the community? And we don't have to ask that in a challenging way. It really is a question, like, what are you doing? Because we're really excited to know. And I mention this to my faculty whenever I have a conversation with them. I say, I'm interested in understanding your service because I want to be able to brag about it. I think it's really important that we aggregate the contributions that our faculty make beyond the classroom and beyond the research activity, because it is tremendous. And as you mentioned, the number of hours that our faculty are committing annually is inspiring, honestly, because those hours are building our communities, and they live in our community. All our faculty, we all live in our communities, and they're contributing in the community because it means that much. The other part that's really great about this is 70% of our faculty studied in countries other than Canada, and they're now in our community. So by virtue of our university being where it is and our business school being compelled to have a global perspective, has allowed us to have that kind of diversity come into our community and contribute in ways that allows for cultural characteristics and individual activities and practices and cuisine and all these great things come into the Niagara region and make us so much richer for it. And it only creates a greater intrigue and curiosity for individuals to want to learn more, which allows the university to facilitate that and have our students study and then go abroad to have a experience globally. So I think I really don't have to do much with respect to our faculty being engaged in the way. It's really, what's your thing? And we're really happy to be able to say that that's great and celebrate it and brag about it.
That's good. It actually brings me to a recent announcement. Tom Robinson, a leading expert in quality assurance, has been appointed as executive in residence for the Goodman School of Business too. What does it mean to Goodman, and what does it mean to us as a community?
Well, when we announced that, it was a conversation I had with Tom Robinson, probably started about this time last year. Looking at, he was retiring from his term as CEO and president of AACSB, which is the largest accrediting organization for business schools around the world. There's probably about 940 business schools accredited now by AACSB. We started talking about it, and we landed on an executive in residence in quality assurance. And when we announced it, I had a good number of deans from around the world say, "Congratulations, how did you do that?" Because Tom Robinson is known around the world, and we just had I don't want to get too granular on this, but we're pursuing another accreditation with another organization, and we had a peer review team visit us last week to go through the accrediting process, and one of the peer review members mentioned, "So Tom Robinson's your executive in residence?" And we said, "Yes." He says, "Well, he's quite the heavyweight. I'd be curious to understand, how did you manage that?" So for Tom to be our executive in residence at our business school first off, is a great accomplishment for our students, staff, and faculty to be able to have someone who's so well recognized for not only business education, but ensuring that it's done in a manner that delivers what we say we deliver to our student body, and that it is globally recognized, and but also engaging in our community. So Tom is committed to quality assurance. He's committed to ensure that students have a pathway towards excellence and seeing themselves in roles that meets their purpose. But then also Tom being available for our students, staff, and faculty for speaking engagements, as well as our community, allows for him to speak on the importance of business education through our university, through our Goodman School of Business, and how it fits into the more complex equation of contributing to a global economy.
Yeah, I was really, really excited to read actually and hear about it. So I'm really, congratulations to you. And now we're in the last third of this hour, and I want to move it forward and move over to actually the questions that have been submitted by individuals ahead of this evening's discussion, but also during this discussion at the same time. And I wanted to extend my thanks to all the participants who are with us on this beautiful evening. It's a beautiful weather here in Niagara right now, and so to stay away from the patio or the dinner and give us this hour, I really do appreciate it. But we want to get to your questions now, and here's one question that has come up a couple of times, and I think you've spoken to it a little bit, but I think it's valuable to bring it forward again. What is the biggest challenge facing students and the school right now?
Wow. There's some challenges that overlap between the students and the school, and there's ones that are specific from one to the other. I think the greatest challenge for students right now is just to know that their mental health and well-being is a challenge, but also the fact that we're conscious of that in such a high level now that we want to ensure that they are well, and that we have resources available and supporting them, and that we communicate that regularly. We have portals on our website. We constantly inform our students either through general messages and individual faculty messages that they are not alone. We have supports for them, because in many instances these are students that are working from their student residence, wherever they're located, or from their room. They're eating, living, sleeping, studying, working from one room, and they don't necessarily have a community to communicate with and to work these things through. So I think that mental health is probably the greatest challenge to ensure that students are taken care as best as we can from our remote locations, and that they have the right resources available to them. When we start getting into other challenges with respect to students, the other challenge is connectivity in this particular time with content. Of course, when we're delivering a course in one geographic time zone, it doesn't necessarily work well in other time zones, and so synchronous delivery is challenging. Asynchronous challenges in other ways. So delivery right now is challenging. But going forward, I think what students will find challenging is alignment of purpose, that each and every single student has a trajectory of where they want to be. And one of the great parts about the individual characteristics of students is that they also have trajectories that aren't necessarily uniform with each other. And I think that's fantastic. But then we also have to make sure that the purpose that our students have, there's an alignment with the purpose that the business school and the university has in our community and the workplace. So one of the things that I think students are challenged with is trying to find a path that allows their purpose to be fulfilled. And so that challenge comes into relevance with the business school, and one of our challenges is to ensure that we do have that purpose alignment. And so we have a myriad of ways for students to see themselves through. And of course, we have the conventional, if I use that word, but I really think it's probably not the right word, but the traditional mechanisms of students aspiring to be with an accounting designation or a CFA designation over time, being going through finance or human resources, And we support all of those. The great part is actually, though, that each one of these pathways can go to such a different realm now for students, where they're employed and how they use their undergraduate education or their graduate education and the professional designation towards satisfying the requirements of the workplace. But within our business school, we can offer the traditional business pathways, but we also offer opportunities such as you mentioned earlier on, the United Nations partnership, where it allows our students to have a co-op internship through the United Nations at a UN agency in the Global South, working in a community where they can contribute to a community in a way that didn't exist before. We are certainly the only business school in Canada that has a UN partnership. We may be the only, certainly one of very, very few that would have that kind of relationship in North America. But it allows our students to find purpose in ways that they can support with the skills and knowledge that they get through business education in a community to help them thrive. And you know, example given, one of our students, our undergraduate students, participated in this. The previous year, was in Cambodia, worked in a community, helped them with the project management on the demining exercise that was happening in that area. He helped them with a silk production, silk manufacturing plant. He contributed to hundreds, if not thousands, of people in that community. He transformed their lives, and we transformed his life. But the really incredible part is that through one person, we've really changed the lives of many in such a positive way. And I think for the challenge for the business schools to see how do we do that so that every single student who graduates sees their purpose, fulfillment, and that we were an important part of that contribution to where they see themselves. And I think if we start thinking of students, all 3,700 of our students at our business school, as each one having a path, a purpose that's not necessarily perfectly aligned with the person next to them, that we offer opportunities, I think we're really providing an opportunity for them to contribute to the communities where they reside when they graduate.
You know, actually, your comments lead perfectly into a question that has been submitted by one of our attendees tonight. And the question that they have is, how do you see the school's global focus helping to rebuild the local communities in Canada that have been decimated by this pandemic? And I think you gave a good example that I think was directly linked to a school's purpose, but also the individual finding a purpose in what they're doing. But in light of all the efforts that the school is putting forward in their global focus, how can you make a difference right here at home?
Oh, well, the difference starts with the unit of one every time. So if we change one life and transform them and they contribute to a community, there's, you know, it has the same contagion as COVID. We see, but in a positive, right? So we see one person come in and they do some positive transformational things. It contributes to the community, that community thrives, that community contributes to the larger community, and so on and so on. So for every student that we see come in from around the world who has a different perspective of how you see and do things, we become richer for it. And the employing organizations and the communities where they reside are richer for it as well. So Canada is a composition of the world, and it has been that for generations. And you know, I think about my dad came from Belgium with his sisters and parents after World War II. My mom's father came from UK. He was one of the home children who you might have heard of historically around the turn of the century, the 1900s. He was an orphan at the age of 10. He came across from Liverpool to Halifax. He was put into a farm just outside of Ottawa, and he was basically working there until 17 when he went to World War I. And so our country is comprised of people from all around the world, and we are richer for it. And so I see us as not questioning, do we stop now or do we continue and we allow for yet more diversity and yet more contributions and richness in perspective. And I think that becomes part of the good stories that come out of seeing our Canada as a place that has brought in people from around the world.
Yeah, and I think it's nice to see that this mosaic that has been created that actually truly defines us and differentiates us from so many other countries. We have been joined this evening by a number of alumni, and across the world there's often the feeling, not specifically from Goodman, but from universities, that it's hard to stay connected. Is there time for Goodman to set up a better, or more of a global alumni social network? And maybe to this individual, maybe it's already in place, but I was wondering if you can expand on it.
Well, I think that's one of the other silver linings that's come out of this past year of disruption, is that we've been able to connect with alumni around the world in forums such as this, to have conversations in what we call round tables. Particularly in the fall, we do this, where alumni come together and we look towards how can we better support and facilitate our graduates from the business school in go forward terms. And so we have been able to connect with our faculty, our graduates, in that way, and we've also seen mechanisms that allow us to potentially facilitate alumni coming together on a platform like this, that we allow alumni, and this is an invitation for the alumni that are watching today, to potentially facilitate a topic that can be shared and discussed among other alumni, that if you have an idea, it can go through our alumni office and facilitate a platform for that kind of engagement, that kind of discussion. Having said that, some 90%, towards 90% of our graduates reside within the Golden Horseshoe area. And that also includes about 2/3 of our graduates who are international students reside in our region. So a lot of our alumni, they may come from around the world, but they end up actually participating and contributing in our local region following graduation. Now, we're probably going to see alumni base that gets larger and larger globally because of our double degree programs, and we're supporting that. And I think we may very well see ecosystems of alumni engagement that happens within particular communities around the world. But I do think we're going to harness our virtual platforms more often to allow for that kind of global engagement and awareness.
Yeah, and while on the note actually of engagement, this is interesting because we've also been joined this evening by a number of businesses, and they have expressed to us, they have expressed to you as well, that lifelong learning is something that's becoming important in this changing world. Job definitions and roles are changing, ever changing quicker. We need to be agile to respond to the market needs and consumer needs that are there. What role can Goodman play in providing these training and development opportunities to local businesses? And secondary, there's also the question, there is more businesses who want to become more involved with Goodman. What is a good way to facilitate that?
That's a couple of responses there. One of them is that we do have our Goodman group, as I've mentioned, and there's programming that runs through that for lifelong learning opportunities, but we're also positioning ourselves for continuing education within our university that allows and supports a even broader reach in the area of lifelong learning, and that's something that's further in development and something that we will see more in the coming year or two as we build that, and I'm really looking forward to that, because it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for anyone within our community to see themselves through an education program that could be a sprint or a marathon, depending on what kind of studying and what kind of engagement they're looking for. But the whole intent is to ensure that we're able to give opportunity to our community who are looking for skill development, professional development, and more engagement with education institution like ours.
Yeah, and that actually, yeah, go ahead.
You had a second part to it, and I don't think that I've answered that yet.
No,
so,
actually, you know what? Actually, it's perfect, actually, because it leads to another actually question that has also just come in, and that is, what are the plans for adult education, especially for the growing demographic in the region? But I think you've touched on it, and because you spoke to the commitment of lifelong learning. The second other aspect of it was that businesses are interested in creating more partnerships with Goodman. That is there too. If it's local ones, in offering experiential opportunities for students that are there, or corporate partnerships that could also maybe be hanging in the balance right now, but could also be future opportunities that are there.
Well, we're the envy of many business schools across Canada. When I start speaking to my colleagues at other universities, the other business deans about our service learning program, our co-op program, I think already we're doing some wonderful contributions to our community through students. working on a project in a classroom that is a consulting gig that allows for pro bono supports to not-for-profits and small business within our community. And that's almost $30 million annually in contributions of our labor force in support of those initiatives. And then, of course, our co-op program, which is the envy of universities across Canada. And we, as a business school alone, contribute almost $12 million in work, FTEs, value across the FTEs to our community as well in the Golden Horseshoe. And so we work closely, very closely with organizations and businesses in our region in order to support them through our students having experiential opportunities while they're studying, but also upon graduation, career opportunities. And then on top of that, conversations through the Goodman Group of offering bespoke programming for individual organizations that allow for professional development of their staff and management, as well as programs much like our professional leadership certificate that you and I run together in partnership with GNCC that allow for further engagement of and development of our community's skill sets and leadership.
Yeah, and they make significant differences actually to organizations. And there's a lot of support that is also available to them for employers to find funding for those courses as well. So there's, if anyone has any questions, they can either reach out to Goodman or to GNCC to help them out and to get further clarity on it. I'm conscious of the time because we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left, but there's a follow-up question that has come in, and it's related to the decline in international student enrollment due to demographics and other factors in the current situation that we're in. How does Goodman see the makeup of its student body over the next 3 to 5 years?
That's a great question, and it's a question that probably every business school is asking. I honestly, I'm on calls with business deans weekly from different locations around the world, and where we see ourselves in 3 to 5 years is, well, if anyone had that crystal clear answer to that, we would probably be doing many other things as well. But where we see ourselves is basically looking at what individuals have for intentions to study. And the surveys and the data is showing that people are interested in studying in international locations. And Canada is one of the top 3 countries as a choice by students around the world, or individuals aspiring to be students from around the world. And in more instances, we're actually seeing Canada as the first choice for individuals to study in. With that in mind, our business school, with the programming that we offer, the opportunity for everything from our double degree program to allow for opportunities in 2 schools and work placement in 2 schools, to our service learning and our co-op, to our geography, which is second to none really around the world. We are located in one of the most enviable geographic places for an existence and experience that allows for really that has all of the attributes as a as a UNESCO World Biosphere and world notoriety because of Niagara Falls, and its placement in its climate, I think lends itself well for a choice just by virtue of those elements. We have a halo effect. But then on top of that, we do see our enrollments and our confirmations with students who have applied internationally are still strong. In this year, our international uptake is as strong as any other year. Now, it's always a question of how are they going to get to Canada, and that question hasn't been fully answered in this year. But I do believe that the idea of an education, international education in business, is not going anywhere. How we deliver it and who we work with in delivering it, it could be an ecosystem of multiple business schools, much like our online education collaboration with a number of business schools within the International Partnership of Business Schools, where students can study and take a course at one of our partners towards satisfying the degree here. As part of that ecosystem, we're going to see that ongoing continued engagement and interest by individuals to study abroad and to have an education that includes participation at a school in another country. So I don't see it going anywhere. A little bit of a dip for a while, but at the same time, I do see this as something that will respond and come back to where we were, if not even grow further.
I actually have heard that from a number of people that actually will grow further. But on that note, I'm conscious of the time, and I can't believe how quickly this hour went by. I hope that in the future that we can hold events like this in person, and I think that would be welcomed. Our in person and as a hybrid model where we can connect in different ways around the globe. But Andrew, I wanted to thank you for your time, and I wanted to give you 30 seconds you have for closing comments before we actually thank all the participants for being with us this evening.
Oh, wow. Closing comments. Well, I think, first off, Mishka, thank you so much for participating in this. I really think it's it's an important partnership that we have with our Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce and the Business School, and that how we continue to work with our community in supporting the local region. But the important part that I think our business school offers, and I think I can also say that is differentiated from the other business schools, certainly within our province and further afield, is that we have this dedication for a global reach that allows for our local community to be richer for it. And I described that already with respect to our faculty that come from around the world, our students that come from around the world, and then they reside and they contribute to our local community and our local economy. And our business school is dedicated to supporting our community, as well as ensuring that our community is connected very well to the global community. So with that, again, Mishka, thank you so much for hosting, allowing me to share the opportunities that we've developed, I think, at the business school, successes and the challenges of this past year, and how we see ourselves going forward in the future.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Really appreciated the opportunity to actually have this dialogue with you. I wanted to extend our thanks to your team for organizing it and making it so effortless for all of us. And for those of you who have tuned in from around the globe, I can say good evening, good morning, good day, whatever applies. We thank you for your time, and we continuously value your input in making Goodman more than it is today, although it rocks and it's extraordinary, and its contributions are greatly appreciated. So thank you very much.
Thank you.